I'm Amy Goodman. As Barack Obama and John McCain trade barbs over issues ranging from Guantanamo and Iraq to Social Security and taxes, there's little in-depth analysis of their policy positions. There's even less coverage of third-party candidates. Back in February, Ralph Nader announced his third bid for the presidency on Tim Russert's Meet the Press.
One feels an obligation, Tim, to try to open the doorways, to try to get better ballot access, to respect dissent in America in terms of third parties and independent candidates, to recognize historically the great issues have come in our history against slavery, and women's rights to vote, and worker and farmer progressives through little parties that never won any national election. Dissent is the mother of assent. And in that context, I have decided to run for president.
Tonight, Ralph Nader is holding a rally here in New York at Symphony Space. He joins us now in Washington, D.C., where actually the private funeral for Tim Russert is being held as people are gathering at this hour. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Ralph.
Good morning, Amy.
It's good to have you with us. First, your thoughts on Tim Russert. It was on his broadcast on Meet the Press in February, on February 24th, that you made your announcement of your presidential bid.
Well, the last conversation I had with Tim Russert, maybe a month and a half ago, he told me how much he believed in intellectual tension on his program. He used that phrase, intellectual tension. And I think that marked his willingness to have, other than the normal redundant Washington politicians on his show, although he had plenty of those. But I think why thousands of people lined up near the Washington Cathedral to pay their respects yesterday is because he had the human touch. He was the busiest mega journalist in Washington. He ran the Washington office. He was on Meet the Press. He had a book review program on cable. He was on call by MSNBC and NBC all the time. And yet, no Washington journalist of his stature returned more calls to more people. So it wasn't just an empty PR gesture on his part. I think he really was from South Buffalo.
You don't have much access to the corporate media. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think the blackout has been exceptional in the last 3-4 months. Stephanopoulos was heard to say that the Tim Russert show was about the most publicity I would get for the whole campaign. And, of course, he hasn't had me on, and Wolf Blitzer hasn't had me on, and Bob Schieffer hasn't had me on. It's rather sad to see because they get higher ratings, there's more excitement. Tim Russert said he heard from people all over the world after my announcement on his show. And the networks, of course, have almost blacked out all third-party independent candidates, except maybe Ron Paul. Why is it? Well, if you look at our website, votenader.org, you'll see why. Because we have a shift of power agenda. We want to galvanize the citizenry. We want to get them involved in shaping the campaign in city after city by getting citizen coalitions together to invite these candidates as they go through the city to their own auditoriums to respond to their own agendas. And when we talk about aggressive crackdown on corporate crime, fraud, and abuse, that's on our table. It's not on McCain-Obama's table, not on the corporate media's table to discuss, although the corporate media reports it every day. We have a security speculation tax. $500 trillion in security derivatives are going to be traded this year. A tiny tax on those transactions would relieve the federal income tax up to $100,000 on American workers. We have solar energy instead of nuclear power. We have single-payer health insurance, which replaces the health insurance moguls and their enormous administrative and bureaucratic waste and their denial of doctor discretion and their pay or die policies in America, unlike all Western democracies. So you can see in many ways that we favor workers and we favor consumers and we favor small taxpayers, we favor the environment to the expense of corporate power. I mean, the issue here is centralized corporate power. And that's why day after day, whether through demonstrations in front of toady government agencies and trade associations in Washington, to campaigning with people and their controversies for justice all over the country, we have made our website, votenader.org, a very vivid, vivacious website for people who want to volunteer, who want to get engaged, who want to contribute money to our campaign. We take no commercial money or PACs, so we rely on individuals. So to sum it up, really, our campaign is to subordinate corporate power to the sovereignty of the people. Why is that a radical notion? Doesn't the Constitution start with we, the people? And speaking of the Constitution, we are strongly for the impeachment of Bush and Cheney. It's never too late for impeachment, or demanding their resignation, the way Nixon and Agnew had to resign, or after they leave office as fugitives from justice on January 21st, to invoke appropriate law to prosecute Bush and Cheney for their recidivist criminal and anti-constitutional behavior day after day, from the criminal war in Iraq to systemic torture, to imprisoning people without charges, to wiretapping them without judicial approval, and to have signing statements that the American Bar Association has condemned, where Bush says, I'll sign these laws, 800 of them, but I'll decide whether I'm going to obey them or not. I think Chuck Hagel put it all in one sum statement, Amy, when he said a few weeks ago, he's a Republican from Nebraska, Senator Chuck Hagel, he said, quote, "We tried a monarchy once. It didn't work," end quote.
What do you think of Chuck Hagel as a vice presidential running mate? Yes, the Republican senator for Barack Obama, one of the names that's being bandied about.
Well, he thinks for himself, and that's about the best you can expect of a politician these days. Senator Jim Webb, Senator Chuck Hagel, they think for themselves. They're not robotic minds. They're not completely monetized minds, and they're Vietnam veterans. So in today's politics, that puts them forward.
Ralph Nader, on his first day as the Democrats' presumptive nominee, Barack Obama traveled to Washington to address AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. This is some of what he had to say.
Now, let me be clear. Israel's security is sacrosanct. It is non-negotiable. The Palestinians need a state. The Palestinians need a state that is contiguous and cohesive, and that allows them to prosper. But any agreement with the Palestinian people must preserve Israel's identity as a Jewish state with secure, recognized, defensible borders. And Jerusalem will remain the capital of Israel, and it must remain undivided.
Obama later appeared to backtrack on his comments about the future status of Jerusalem as capital. In a follow-up interview on CNN, he said it would be up to the Israelis and Palestinians to negotiate. Ralph Nader.
Well, I think Barack Obama is in training to become panderer-in-chief. That was really a disgraceful speech. It didn't further the peace process, the two-state solution favored by a majority of Jewish Americans, Arab Americans, a majority of Israeli and Palestinian people. He basically sided with the militaristic approach to occupying, repressing, colonizing, destroying the Palestinian people in the West Bank and Gaza. He hasn't even spoken out against the international crime of the blockade of Gaza, 1.5 million people, from medicine, drinking water, fuel, electricity, food, lots of silent fatalities in Gaza because of that. Barack Obama really now has to be examined very carefully. He has worn out the word change. We now want to know what change is involved. It's quite clear that he is a corporate candidate from A to Z. In his voting record, he voted against reform of the Mining Act of 1872, which gives away our hard rock minerals. He voted for a terrible class action restriction law that the corporations wanted him to vote for. He, in many ways, has disappointed people who had greater hopes for him. He's voted for reauthorizing the Patriot Act. He refuses to even discuss. He's vigorously against impeachment. of Bush and Cheney. He won't even support his colleague, Senator Russ Feingold, motion to censure the Bush administration for systemic, repeated, illegal wiretaps. He's letting the corporate-dominated city of Washington, the corporations who actually rule us now in Washington, determine his agenda. And that does not augur well. He's just appointed economic advisors right out of the Robert Rubin School of Citigroup in the University of Chicago. His Middle East advisors involve people who actually helped write his AIPAC speech.